Okay, good morning everybody. It's 10 o'clock. I'll just wait for the IT because you don't want to hear me on repeat. Okay, testing. Okay, lovely, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Welcome to Overview and Scrutiny. It's Thursday, the 14th of September. Thank you very much for attending. We'll start with agenda item 1, which is the minutes from our meeting held on the 8th of June, pages 6 through to 17. Are you all happy that they're a true record, please, committee members? Yep, approved. Thank you very much. Item 2, apologies and substitutes. Ruth?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Kybird and Councillor Wickerson, and we have Councillor Attewell as substitute for Councillor Wickerson.
Lovely. Thank you very much for substituting, Roger. Appreciated. Chairman's announcements, if any. I don't have any today, but there's some bits we'll pick up later on in the agenda under the work programme. There's no items of urgent business. Does anybody have any declarations of interest that they wish to declare? No, thank you very much. Item 6, non-members wishing to address the meeting. There's several non-members here today. Thank you very much for coming. Do feel free to contribute as we go through. I will take Commission member questions first, but by all means do put your hand up and I'll pop you on the list if you've got any questions or points that you want to make. Be useful to have your input. So we're straight on then to item 7. Very pleased to welcome representatives from Flagship today. We've got Tony, Adrian and Alice. Thank you very much for attending, very much appreciated. And also Victoria from Orbit. So thank you very much to the 4 of you for coming along. I know from talking to members of the Commission, but also wider members of the Council, housing is a big part of the work that we do as a council, absolutely significant. But a lot of the work, day-to-day particular, is done by housing associations, which we don't always get to see and hear too much about. So I wanted very early on to get some housing associations in and have a conversation about what the issues are that you guys are facing, how we can work better together as a council and what the opportunities are. I know that Flagship have prepared a presentation which I'm very pleased to receive. So we'll start with Flagship and then we'll take Orbit and then we'll open it up to questions. So over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name's Adrian Barber. I'm the Managing Director of Victory Homes, which is part of Flagship Group. Victory Homes manages most of the stock for Flagship in Norfolk. You, as Breckland Council, are one of our 2 biggest partners, as you'll appreciate from the stock transfer many years ago. What I'm going to try and do is just give a flavour of what we're working on as a group. Some of which relates directly to Breckland, of course, and I do have some details. I'm sure there will be questions on more specific issues. But just to try and give a flavour of the world of housing at the moment, which is probably, as you will have seen from the media and other sources, quite a rapidly changing picture and quite a pressured environment at the moment. Tony will then talk to you about our development programme in Breckland, things that we have delivered and where we're going with that. I dare say we'll touch on things like nutrient neutrality at some point. But hopefully it'll be helpful. I'll try not to talk for too long. In terms of the slide, the next slide, it really what we are very much focused on is, as you'll appreciate, the financial positions of housing associations has been tested more than it has been for a number of years, really, with an increased emphasis on wanting us to build, and we've been building quite successfully over the last few years, quite large numbers of homes. Because we've been encouraged to do that. But of course, the change has happened that there's a lot more focus on existing stock, on net zero, on how we're going to improve the quality of homes for the future. And of course, the cost of living, with inflation going to higher levels, our rents were capped below that last year, and for perfectly valid reasons. Inflation was 11% and rent increases was 7%, which is still a lot of rent increase, but of course a 4% gap. So us looking at our resources and how we best use those. So this is a real summary of what we need to focus on. The consumer standard, many of you will have seen that, the regulator, the new housing laws, the new acts coming in. That's more increased emphasis on tenant engagement, and really how as an organisation can we evidence that we are listening to our tenants and we are changing things for the better for them. And that's always a challenge for organisations of how you evidence it, because of course we talk to people all the time. It's that bigger picture. So we have quite a robust system in place where we have an influencer network, as we call it. We have people that influence at group level, we have people influence at local level, and we have in terms of for Victory, and we have people that influence on the ground, very much day-to-day transactional. But it's a big focus for it, and we're trying very hard as an organisation. I have no doubt this is exactly the same in other housing association partners, on understanding who lives in our homes far better. What are their needs? What do they need from us? And of course, things like cost of living are incredibly important. How the efficiency of their homes, the efficiency of their heating systems. Those are things that we're working very hard on, but also the environment they live in. You will know that there's a lot of work looking at the Abbey estate. Now that's a major investment programme that's going to take some time to get together, but it's our biggest example as Flagship Group of trying to look at something on a much bigger scale and work with partners to find long-term solutions. Repairs is absolutely our number one focus. We accept that we haven't always got our repair service right, and we are grappling with some of that. A big step change for us, we have a new system coming in on the 25th of September, so only in a week and a bit's time, which will give us a very much improved and modernised ability to get our operatives to the right places at the right time in the most efficient way. And to be able to do that by their skill set and make sure that we're getting more done more quickly, and that tenants can, in probably the next 2 or 3 months, be able to see that information online, because at the moment they can't. So we're working very hard to try and improve the transparency of the information, but also get the work done. Of course, these things take time to settle down, but it is our absolute focus. Following that up is work we are also doing to offer people online access to that service and others, book online, not have to phone us, so that they can check their repairs, they can see what's ordered and when things are happening. So to give much more access to it. Complaints handling is a huge focus with the Housing Ombudsman Service, and quite rightly it has far greater teeth now, and you will have seen that they've gone after some organisations with what I've never seen fines like it, and I'm not saying that's wrong. It's very interesting what they are now doing, and it is holding us to account. And we are pleased that we've managed to reduce our levels of complaint and our response to them. But what we're working on is how satisfied are people with that process. We may well resolve things, but do we resolve it to a point where people feel they've been listened to and they've been heard and we've done things well? So that's a big piece of work for us. There is increased emphasis on us working, and this is where clearly we need to be working together on the social, environmental and economic well-being. And if everybody is touched, we firmly believe, housing, having a robust, safe, secure home is fundamental to everything, health, everything. So that's our big emphasis. But we are now also being encouraged to look at the environment and respond to that. So it's no longer good enough for us to just look at our housing stock. It's the environment that people live in that we need to look at as well. And what does that mean for us as partners? Does that mean access? Rural housing is a challenge in itself. Do you invest in communities that perhaps don't have the road and transport links? Because you potentially isolate those people, no jobs, nowhere to go, or do you not invest but run the risk of killing villages for young people or people who can't afford to live in them? So those are some of the challenges we've got. Energy efficiency, an enormous part of our work going forward. We know that net zero will cost hundreds of millions of pounds to deliver as it currently stands. We are investing in research into how do we deliver that, what is going to be sustainable, what's the order, air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, solar panels. We're looking at more innovative heating systems that are heating on the ceilings, heating on the walls. We're trying to find ways to make it more efficient, not for us, but for our tenants, so they're not paying out as much for running their homes. Costs, I think I've touched on that, but we are really focused very hard this year on how do we ensure that the money we do have is being focused on the priorities. And we are spending a lot of time looking at where can we cut out waste. I'm sure you'll be doing the same. You've been doing it probably longer than we have, to be honest, considering the battering sometimes you've had. But it is so important now, because it's not today, it's what's coming on the horizon that we're having to really focus on and plan for. And there is that tension of your existing stock and the importance of that versus needing to build new homes. There simply are not enough homes. That links into stock quality, really, same sort of issues, but we have gone to 75. We have visited 75% of our stock. So we aren't cloning. Our ambition is to achieve 100% so that we aren't cloning data. That is being encouraged, and we're very pleased to be achieving that. And of course, it gives us far better, reliable information on what we have. Some of the challenges we know, there's still inherent things like asbestos. When you want to put air source heat pump systems in, you basically need to create a sealed envelope, and that requires wall insulation, new windows, new doors, new roofs, insulation. So it's a major project for the quality of a lot of the British housing stock, not just flagship stock, but the British. And of course, Breckland stock is older. So it does have those challenges. And of course, performance, you wouldn't expect me to say anything but how do we achieve better? We are getting better at our void loss. I'm sure voids, so empty homes, is incredibly important to members. Trying to turn them round as quickly as possible, trying to make sure we're getting people into those homes, trying to make sure that we're supporting you with temporary accommodation where we can, but obviously not taking that from day-to-day stock, because that means we then have less homes for long term. So that's us as a focus. Locally focused, we have been increasing our teams. We're just about to bring in 3 more members of staff to focus directly on those people that we don't speak to that often or at all, because we need to understand, are they okay? Is their home okay? If they're not reporting repairs to us, they're not reporting anything to us, we need to check that that's okay. And that, I think, will receive some resistance over the coming months. We've seen a few people anxious about why we want to do that. And it is absolutely for their benefit, not to try and do anything untoward. It is to check you are living in a safe and secure home. But people have got used to, through COVID and other things, of us not coming into their homes. So there is a little bit of tension with a small number of people, but I think it's absolutely the right thing to be doing. so that we know every one of our tenants is safe and secure. That said, are you okay if I pass over to Tony?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's Tony Tan. I'm Managing Director of the Flagship Group's development team. I also sit on the group's leadership team alongside Adrian. So just 4 slides from me today, talking about the past, the present and the future. So over the last 5 years, we've provided our tenants and customers with the keys for 88 homes. The schemes are there, perhaps as councillors you would have maybe seen and been involved in their progression. So if you want to take a second to read, or whether you see those again later. The next slide is where we currently are. So we have 293 homes that we're building in Breckland currently. Ellingham Green, that's just about finished. There's 3 homes to build complete there. Crownview at Great Ellingham has just started. Necton is just finishing, although we have issues with highways that are preventing occupation. Narborough, the 40 homes, is about 3 or 4 months in, and Thetford is just about to start for us. So that's what we're currently doing. And then the next slide is where the future is. So we have another 337 homes in the pipeline for the Breckland area. South Green Dereham is held up with some planning concerns and nutrient neutrality. Close Yaxham is held up with some drainage concerns and some viability issues. Swaffham is progressing through planning. Dereham is progressing through planning. Necton Phase 3 is just progressing through planning. Narborough Phase 2 is progressing through planning, and East Harling is a Section 106 scheme where we're working with one of the developers on. So not many homes in the last 5 years, lots on site at the moment, and a big pipeline coming forward, all of which obviously to get the pipeline there's some ducks we need to put in a row to start. So that's currently where we are in terms of delivery. We have some challenges and focus areas within Breckland. A key one for us is staircasing restrictions on shared ownership homes. Currently, if there is a staircasing restriction, we won't build it. So if there is Section 106 homes, do you want to explain it?
What's a staircase?
Okay, so when you buy a shared ownership home, now you can buy anywhere between a 10 and a 75% share straight away. So we own the other share, the customer buys the first share. Most of our customers, through their low-cost home ownership, want to then own their homes outright, and most of the lenders want them to own their home outright, so they can staircase upwards. So you buy another percentage, more percentages, until you get to 100%. Within Breckland, there is a focus on restricting that ownership to 80%. That becomes very tricky for the customers who want to buy those homes, because they can never own them outright, and there's very limited mortgage supply and mortgage companies that will provide funding on those homes. So typically they can get to 80%, they can't go any further, the limited resale market, so they end up getting stuck. And in a couple of cases we've had to buy the homes back. Well, that's not the most successful model for us, to buy homes back that are stuck on shared ownership. So most local authorities work with us. Within Breckland it's not quite so clear. There are some elements within Breckland where staircasing doesn't apply, and where it does, it's quite tricky to lift. So there are things that we focus on. How we resolve it is we just do all rented homes, but it reduces viability and the success on the schemes. Most recently there's a shared ownership home selling price review. So when we sell our homes, we go to an RCS surveyor and get a market valuation. So we don't set the values that we sell. We ask somebody else, the professional, to do it for us, and that's the figure that we use. Breckland have recently asked for approval of that level, which is fine, so we can give that approval to Breckland, but it takes 31 days to approve. So suddenly within our sales process, we have to allow 31 days for a third-party approval for us to sell something. Alice is our liaison with Breckland, and she's also a lawyer. And she's working with the Breckland team to find a different way to do this. I think all Breckland want to do is make sure that we're not overcharging for the homes, that we are using an RSCS market value. We do that as standard anyway, so we're trying to say, well, that's what we do, so do you need to approve it? So that's one challenge. Nutrient neutrality, that's something that, well, is it good or bad news in the Lords yesterday? Because you either home, in theory, house people or pollute the rivers. We think we can probably deal with both. But that's causing us an issue. The site of Dereham, the 39 homes, is all ready to start, but we're held up on nutrient neutrality. And there's other schemes across the country. So do people understand what nutrient neutrality is? It's, well, into the, yes, yeah. I've lived it for a year and a half, so so that's a challenge, but that's just not a Breckland thing. And then the relationship development, we found as a development team that we had lost touch with our local authorities, not just Breckland, with many. So our leadership team within development, and we're now allocating local authorities that we are paying close attention to, because we need to understand the issues that Breckland have and vice versa. And that's working very well. It's something that we hadn't done. It just drifted, and through COVID it had almost got lost. But now we're making a firm effort to make sure that relationship is better and stronger. So from a development, past, future, present, future, and some concerns, that's me finished.
Lovely. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Adrian. Alice, is there anything you wanted to add before I move on from flagship? You're happy? Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much for that then. So, Victoria.
Say no. Okay. Well, there we are. To be fair, from Orbit's perspective, I think Flagship and Orbit work very similarly. So from what you've been saying, I recognise a lot of it. I'm more actually in the relet of properties themselves, so I'm actually a housing manager. So I find the people that go into the homes. We do have hold-ups when it comes to finding people for houses sometimes, because people... sorry, where was I? Yeah, so we're quite lucky actually in the Breckland area that when we don't get many void properties that come up, we don't have to work on many relets. The average time is higher than we would like, just because people may not like the area, or it could come down to affordability at the moment because the cost of living is an issue. We don't want customers to fail when we relet to them, so we will work very hard with their finances to see if there's any way we can help so we can house successfully. I'm just trying to think what else I've got here. And we have had some relets due to DMC, so damp, mould and condensation, which is something that Orbit is aggressively working on. We have a handful of cases in the east, in the Breckland area, but they're just cases that we are investigating. There's nothing major at the moment. So yeah, from a relet, I think we're quite lucky in Breckland because we do have properties in nice areas. We have people waiting for them, even if we're still working on them. And our relet days may not be as quick as we like, but we're actively trying to improve our service with our contractors to make them more efficient. Can we get our inspectors in there earlier to do pre-assessments, to get the work lined up, ready to go, so that way customers are not waiting for their new homes to become available. Yeah, we have a healthy pipeline of new builds coming up. We've got the Dereham area, we've got Attleborough as well. I know we have about 40 properties that are due to be handed over to housing, social housing, by the end of the financial year, and there'll be, I think, 15 by the end of December that are ready to go. But that's an ongoing process. We'll get them handed over in chunks throughout the coming years. I'm not sure what else I can add to it, unless you guys have got any questions about the housing side of it at all.
Lovely, thank you. I'm sure there will be questions. Just a quick one for me so I can understand the scale. How many properties do Orbit have in Breckland? And then I'll ask the same question to Flagship. roughly?
I don't think I can give you an exact answer,
That's
but
fine.
it's going to be in the thousands. I know that much. It's not going to be hundreds. It will
Okay.
be in the thousands, I reckon.
Okay.
Because if you're talking just social housing or you're talking shared ownership and sheltered housing, we have a lot.
Okay, that's good. Well, I might follow up with you separately just to get an idea so that we can map some of that. I think that'd be really useful. Do you guys know the flagship figure?
Yeah, we're in the region of 6,000.
Okay. Brilliant, thank you. Thank you very much for your contributions. I appreciate, Claire, we've got you here as the Cabinet Member for Housing. Is there anything you wanted to add at this point before I move on to questions? No? Happy? Brilliant. Well, I saw several of you scribbling notes there, so who'd like to go first? We've got Harry first then, please.
Thank you very much. Am I on? It's on now, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Thanks very much for the presentation. I know at least two members of the Commission in the distant past had visited, the former sort of flagship HQ in Dereham when we went to, we had a sort of housing sort of little working group. We also went to Right First Time, so we saw all the high-level presentation, so we can reflect on that and how things have moved on and progressed and some of the other challenges. Obviously, see colleagues not nodding. I've got two or three rolled into one here, really. One sort of question is around timescale and things like complaints and so forth. I'm guessing that will appear in a sort of performance figures that you have at your leadership team and the board. That's one issue. You referred to the stuff coming out online, I think 25th of September, so tenants can see the new system, so you can see where things are happening or not, and that's obviously in relation to their own property. So that's really an information question. You also mentioned, I think this is relating to flagship, that you'd visit, I think, 75% of the stock, and I'm guessing looking at the numbers of new properties that you referred to, which are around about 88, which I think is around about 17 a year. I'm guessing it's some of the older stock that you may not have visited or acquired and got those particular challenges in. My sort of question really is in terms of, one is when you're going to visit those, say, other 25%, and the other issue is with the challenges you've got, assuming that do those challenges go as far as your board level? So if, for example, any provider might, for example, be served with an enforcement notice, regrettably, presumably your board would hear of that. That's one question. And the second one is, and that's also directed to the Cabinet member, is how you see the relationship between the board level, as well, not just the operational level, between Breckland and yourselves. Thank you.
Adrian, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much. I'll try and deal with those in turn. In terms of complaint performance, we are achieving at the moment 100% compliance with the Ombudsman's Code, making sure we respond to complaints within their defined period, and that we do give a final response within their defined period. That is something we've worked very hard on over the year and wasn't something we were achieving previously, but we're very pleased to be doing that now. We have across all of our stock in Victory, so I'm sorry I can't be specific about Breckland on this one, we have 4 cases with the Ombudsman. They are historic cases, and members will probably know that there is quite a long backlog of when we get those. We've been very pleased that we haven't received any negative findings from the Ombudsman. Probably saying that is the worst thing I could do. But we work very hard to try and find a resolution that is fair and equitable. 25th of the 9th, just to be clear, it's a system called Total Mobile. It won't give online access immediately. What it will do immediately from the 25th is the ability to ensure that we're sending the right operatives to the right places. And how it will work is they'll get their first job, just in brief, if that's okay. They'll get a job. When they finish that job, the system will look at where's your next nearest job. whereas we have been doing it if they get their jobs for the week and they work their way through those jobs. So it will hopefully ensure we are expecting to get some efficiency out of that, and certainly be able to attend more frequently at the time we've dedicated. The 75% stock condition survey, we have an ambition to do 20% a year. So we continually refresh that. So it's a continual process, so that we do have the most accurate information. So we don't particularly segment and say, well, we'll only do these. We take a range across all stock so that we are keeping a good flavour of what the position is. And what we have is a local structure at Flagship. So I am the managing director responsible for the Victory area. As I say, it's most of Norfolk. It's my responsibility to have the local connections. I have a local housing board, so there is a board for Victory which is responsible for ensuring that we're delivering those local services well. And the chair of that board attends the group board, and there is all of the minutes from the local housing board go to the group board, and there is an opportunity for that chair to speak at that board when necessary. And of course those boards are all involved in our strategic planning. So we have a strategic planning day later this month, and all of the local housing boards, so there's one for Victory, one for Samphire and one for Newtide, they are all invited to attend, and it is a big focus of the day for the group board because it is so focused on the customer. Our job locally is the customer service. The centre is very much the planning and the strategic direction. I hope those answer.
Happy? Yep. I've got Peter next, please. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will start off with a positive. Flagship Victory Housing. My ward is Narborough, and I'm still very proud of that 2015 development of 33 social houses. A lot of work had to go into that with removing covenants and funding and that sort of thing. The communication you was mentioning, that has improved with your customers over the last few years. I think there's been a change of personnel. I was complaining that often. I was given a dedicated email address to respond with things, but it has worked. It is getting better, and I'm just wondering, your communication with your tenants does need to, to keep going with the internet as well. Examples where a kitchen cupboard's been falling off the walls, you've sent somebody around to look at them. 6 months later, they've not heard anything. Then they come to me to ask the question, and then we get the new kitchen done within weeks. So so basically taking me out of the scenario and my colleagues, that is really good idea with the communication. And the welfare as well, checks as things. I believe that could be ideal to check the state of the property, because you had one in Narborough recently. I know there was a lot of antisocial behaviour with not from the tenant but to him, and he's like a recluse in the end, and it cost you £15,000 to put that, basically just basically get that property back on the market. And if there had been some welfare checks in it and on the property, that might have saved you that cost, and that property would have come back on the market a little bit quicker. But like I say, the antisocial behaviour team worked with them last week. They are working really, really well. So, no question, Chairman. Sorry, but that's just a positive note that things have improved as a member, as I see it. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Peter. Terry, next.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have 3 questions. I don't know whether you want me to do one and then let other people.
If you ask 2, and then I'll come back to you at the end.
Okay. Thank you. First question is, in addition to my work as a councillor, I volunteer at a community shop in Thetford. That is a discounted shop for people who are struggling as an alternative to a food bank, and I do a little bit of work there. Part of my role there, sort of officially and unofficially, is handing out help to people in terms of fuel bank vouchers, food bank vouchers and household referrals. The vast majority of people that come to me for help, and I would comment on that largely they don't want to, it's a last recourse. The people that come to help because of increase in rents, I think you said 7%, because of increase in fuel costs and household costs more generally, are flagship tenants. So my question is, what support do you give people who find themselves, anecdotally, we're getting more and more of those people who find themselves in financial stress?
Thank you very much. We've seen this a lot. In fact, it started very much with COVID, needing to think again about our priorities for delivery and think about how we support people. Cost of living has followed that very quickly. As an organisation, we set aside significant sums last year across all of the stocks. So again, I can't give you for Breckland specifically, but we gave out nearly 400,000, 3,000 short of £400,000 in affordable for all and help with heating. We tend to give out heating vouchers or food vouchers primarily. And we were giving them out just incredibly rapidly, very sadly. We did have 3 dedicated affordable for all officers, so people could phone us and without having to explain, because it's very difficult for people, isn't it? It's embarrassing for them sometimes, and I get that. We try and make it as easy as possible to explain, and we were issuing vouchers as quickly as we could. We of course had to be careful because there were some people that were accessing quite a number of vouchers, so we did have to curb that a little bit to make sure that we were giving that out evenly. But absolutely that continues, and part of the reason for visiting people, as was mentioned by the previous speaker, is to check condition, but it is also to check, are you getting what you're entitled to? I have a team dedicated to tenancy sustainment, and they work with people who need short-term help, and they brought in last year just short of £1 million additional income for tenants, so not to us, but actually to make sure they were getting the benefits they were entitled to.
Lovely. Just before you ask your second question, Terry, Victoria, I'd imagine as a housing manager you see firsthand a lot of that. Does Orbit provide I'm conscious Orbit is to the north of the district. I want to make sure we get a good spread. Do you have a similar scheme?
Yeah, we do. We do have vouchers for food. We do have vouchers for fuel. We offer tenancy coaches for budgeting to help people just trying to trim the fat where they need it. You have tenancy statement. We call them tenancy triage.
Yeah.
So we have teams that they can also reach out to that can refer them to grants. And also we did for customers who were coming into the company that had nothing, we would offer them carpeting. So we ran a trial with carpeting to see how successful that would be in order to help. That went down very well, and now we're considering if we can spread it out a bit further now. So yeah, Orbit do exactly the same thing. We offer a lot of support to our customers, not just financially, but for their own well-being as well. Okay, so wherever we can.
In my notes here, I've got, as an action, it'd be really useful, I feel, if both organisations could communicate that to councillors about what, because we're on the coalface as well, and we get lots of requests for help. Some of that I was aware of, others may also be aware. But if the more information we've got to help support your tenants, the better, frankly. So if you could share that with us, that'd be really useful. Sorry, Terry, I interjected there.
Thank you very much. My second question, I know you won't comment on individual cases, but I had a woman come to me within the last fortnight. She'd asked for repairs from Flagship. She's in a Flagship home, and they'd taken over 2 years, and when they finally got done, it ended with other pieces of her property being smashed up. She's not very pleased about that. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that case because I know you won't. But more generally, how long would your average time wait be for repairs, and how long are you looking to get repairs done as a target, please? Thank you.
It's quite difficult to give you the detail of the average repair. What I can say is it's not good enough at the moment, and we recognise that as an organisation, hence the investment in trying to improve that. We have had a challenge, and this is not an excuse, we have a genuine challenge of trying to recruit the right skills. There just seems to be a real problem. We've got 30 vacancies for skilled tradespeople, sorry. So that doesn't help us, but there is no excuse, and I'm very sorry to hear that one. I'd be very happy to take those details if you write to me directly. It shouldn't happen. But we are abiding by what the regulator and the Housing Ombudsman have asked for, so 28 days for a standard repair. And I can remember now, I think it's 7 days for an urgent repair and 48 hours for emergencies, although we tend to respond to them much more quickly than that, depending on the emergency. We're not hitting the routine repairs enough, and it is a big focus on how do we do that. The group board has asked for that piece of work. We've done a lot of analysis. We have said we need to try and recruit more people, but we also need to get to more homes and get the work done first time. One of the challenges can be making sure you know what the repair is. And in a place the size of Norfolk, you don't really want to be sending people out to find out what the repair is to then do. So we're trying to find ways to improve diagnosis. What I would say is we're not happy with where we're at the moment, and we're working very hard to improve that. Our ambition is to achieve 95% of those targets being hit by May next year.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got, just so you're clear on my list, I've got Linda, then Roger, Gordon and David.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a question for both housing associations and for the wider housing association body. So I'm looking ahead to the future. One of the questions most members in this room get asked is, I've got a 2 or 3 bedroom property and I want to downsize. And this isn't just elderly people, this is people with mental health issues, single people, all sorts of ages and ranges. And so I'm asking you is, when you're looking in your future building, will you consider more single bedroom dwellings and also more single level dwellings? And I don't just mean bungalows. We've got a housing association building in our ward who are building maisonettes. So you're getting more people on the same size of piece of land, because not everybody wants a garden, but they're happy to look out on a communal space. It's thinking more forwardly. If they're built at the beginning with all the things put in, all the eco stuff, all the zero stuff, it's a lot cheaper than adapting it later on. I think I do speak for most members that we're having similar questions raised. Surgeries, I did a tour of the village yesterday. In our village, we did a village appraisal, and the majority of people, that's what they want. So will you please take that on board? Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. Roger?
Thank you. Chairman, I don't know how you want me to do this, but you won't be surprised to find out that I've got a number of points and questions. I've got 6 down here, one of which I'd like to direct to the Cabinet member, and the other 5 I'd like to take out with Mr Barber. So would you like me to do all of them or a couple and get a response? How would you like me to do it?
If you could do a couple, Roger, because I'm conscious I've got a list of speakers. We'll do a couple and then I will come back to you.
Okay. So the first one, I just want to talk about empty property turnaround times. Do you have an average time that you expect once a property becomes vacant that you will turn that around in terms of getting a new tenant in there. I live on an estate which is predominantly flagship properties. I'd say 96% of the properties are flagship properties. So I see with my own eyes how long it's taking you guys from when a property becomes empty to actually getting a tenant in there. And I've got to say, as somebody who works in the building industry, by any stretch of the imagination, I don't think that turnaround time is anywhere near good enough. Because I speak to the housing team here and I know how many people we've got on a waiting list that desperately need a home. So I'd like to understand a bit more about the challenges with that. And I really want to take you up on communication because it's my experience and the experience of residents on my estate, and I have quite a lot of elderly people who I deal with. I'm sorry, but what you've said this morning about your communication bears no resemblance to what we're experiencing in Swanton Morley. I'm talking specifically about Primrose Square, just so you know the location. I know you've got the Swanton Vale location in Swanton Morley, which is the brand new houses people are moving into, and I understand from residents there the communication has been excellent. It just seems on the older properties, your communication has been abysmal. I have been writing continuously to housing officers. I've had one come out and see me, promised the earth about things that he was going to do for residents. I've had another lady who's come out. I met her here with the housing team, and frankly, I'm tired of your officers talking a good game and not delivering. We have a number of issues I'm talking Swanton Morley here, but I know other residents in other villages have similar challenges. You seem to be responsive to nice compliments, but when there's a complaint or something that needs sorting out, which is a bit of a tricky issue, you guys are nowhere to be seen. I'm happy to take that up with you outside this meeting, Mr. Barber, but I wouldn't want you to go away from here thinking everything's rosy and that Breckland councillors are sitting here and think everything is wonderful with the flagship. Because I have to say, from what I see, you're a failing organisation in my experience. So that's the first two I've got. I'd like to know how you're going to improve those communications with residents and with district councillors who are trying to raise genuine concerns.
Roger, sorry to interrupt. Has your microphone turned itself off? It wasn't me, I promise. They are being a bit temperamental today. I don't know if everyone noticed. So just do make sure the green light's on stays on.
Got red light. There we go. Yeah, so communication, I've got to say, has been woeful, and I think the team here at Breckland share my frustration. I've had lots of conversations with the director, Steve James, here about your organisation just through sheer frustration, and he's tried to get responses, and I know Sam Armitage, when she was here, tried to get responses from you guys, and they share that frustration with me. You are not responsive when there's a problem, and you need to tackle it head on, and I'd really like the opportunity to have that conversation with you outside this room. I'll come on to the others later if you give me the opportunity.
Yeah, I see you reaching for the mic there, Adrian, if you'd like to respond to that first point.
Yeah, thank you. Overall, our voice performance as an organisation is around 32 days for general needs accommodation, longer for our older, frail elderly supported accommodation and so on. In Breckland, it is 57 days, so it is a lot higher. That's partly born out of a number of things. I think Orbit mentioned it earlier, Victoria mentioned it earlier, around nominations, applications not being up to date, but also works. There are issues in getting the works completed quickly enough. We have had challenges with our asbestos contractor, where those were taking adding 14 days to those issues. There are also properties that we are sadly seeing that the standard of the handback of those properties is getting worse. So we're needing to look at how we tackle that. We spent about £400,000 last year clearing rubbish belongings from vacated homes. but we are trying all the time to get those times down. They were considerably higher. They were in the 70s and 80s. So they are coming down all the time. I can't give you the detail of specific. I'd be very happy to look at individual properties if I'm given the information, and I can look at that. I must be honest, I don't recognise the second description. We have a dedicated councillor inquiries line. I don't know if you use it. I'm sorry, I don't deal with them day to day, but if you're not getting responses to them, then more than happy to be looking at that. My head of housing is also available for such meetings. I'm not available, I'm not aware of those requests, but I'd be very happy to chat outside about that. I don't know about Swanton Morley, so again, I would need to see the details and what it is specifically about that. I meet with Steve James fairly regularly, and he has a direct line to me. I'm again not aware of what you describe, so nothing's been raised with me in that regard. So I can't specifically answer those questions, but I fully accept. I think I've been quite candid that we haven't got everything right, and we're working very hard to get it right. I don't want to sit in here and you have to tell me these things because you clearly feel very frustrated by it. So I'd be very happy to sit down and chat about it.
Okay, Roger.
So, with regard to the handover of the properties and the turnaround time, would that be fair?
We would hope that isn't necessary, but this is a difficult one because we try and take the view that this is people's homes and they need to be able to live in their homes without too much intrusion. And we try not to put standards on people about how they live. So it is quite difficult at times to have those conversations because you wouldn't want to be told that your house is not good enough. What we do see, and it is an increasing trend, is mental health. Mental health and hoarding is going up quite considerably. We are seeing a lot more properties where people are struggling. It's got beyond them able to cope. So we have a team that dedicate to going in and trying to gradually support them. We are looking at a partnership with yourselves and a company called Lofty Heights, who are a social enterprise, and they will be working in the area, we hope, very soon, to work more closely with those people to try and help them clear those properties and get them up to speed. So there are a number of things we try and do to support people who are struggling. But yes, there are times when we don't get it right. Absolutely, I agree.
Okay, did you want to ask a second point, Roger, before I move on, or are you happy to leave it there?
I did too. We talked about communication.
Yes.
I'll come on
Yep.
to the others if you'll allow me later.
No, that's lovely, thank you. I've got Gordon next then, please, Gordon.
Right, thank you, Gordon Bambridge. My ward is to the north east of the district, and I have to say I haven't had many complaints over the years I've been a councillor with you, but I've got one that came to me yesterday, which I haven't spoken to Breckland people about yet. I'm in the process of drafting a reply, because it is quite a nasty complaint, and it's neighbour disputes, which of course I appreciate are always very difficult, but I'd like to see you managing them better, because this one I think has been managed quite badly, and I have to say probably both by you and by Breckland, so I'll be talking to them as well about it. And I would like some comfort from you that you are prepared to deal with neighbour disputes and not let them run on. I mean, I've got some videos here which would be appalling if they were happening in your neighbourhood where you live. I'm sure you wouldn't want to be there. And you mentioned something about not telling you how to live, I think you said to Mr. Atterwell. Well, I think sometimes you do have to tell people how to live, because some people are living in ways that are appallingly offensive to the people who live around about them. So that's something we could perhaps discuss. The matter of rural improvements that you're making, if I can just add something on the end, rather than bring it back, I would quite like to talk to you sometime about that if I could, and perhaps I could email you. I haven't got your email, but someone will give it to me, and you can put me into the right member of your team to speak to. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Gordon. I've got David and then William.
Okay, two, please. The first one is Kingsfleet in Thetford. New build has come to Kingsfleet in Thetford. New build has come to like an abrupt halt. There's no work on those social housings on that site, and they seem to be put to the very, very end. So maybe they will be built after the rest of the development is finished. Why can't you get on with those now and really get that social housing into use on that site quite quickly? That's the first one. The second one is to both organisations. There's a lot of under-occupancy going around, and in another life I help people get discretionary housing payments and whatever. If you do managed moves to move people out of the over-large property into a smaller one, but it needs to be in their community because for schooling and whatever else, you would reduce the demand for properties. But you won't do that. You look for mutual exchanges rather than a managed move to help the people move in that location. Is this something you could look at? Doing that back, Roger.
Is that one for you, Tony?
So Adrian will pick up the second point, and then I'll pick up the first, if that's okay.
Yes. Under occupancy, yes. Yeah. So we don't have any right to move people, and I'm sure you appreciate that. We would like people that are under occupy, and I think back to the point earlier, we would like to see people able to release larger accommodation, and we will support them to do that. And there have been times where we give them higher priority to do that on the waiting list. But it is very much managed by the waiting list, how we move people. Yes. And that is Breckland's decision on priorities within that waiting list. So hence we say mutual exchange, because they tend not to get the priority on the waiting list. So we encourage them to do mutual exchanges because there is more opportunity for them. It may be something that Breckland wishes to look at as part of its allocations review as to whether it wants to give higher priority. And it's something we would certainly, we work very well with you as an organisation, and we do contribute to that. Something we have been negotiating very recently is nomination agreements. So we have an agreement with you about how many of the homes that come vacant are you able to access. Traditionally, that's 75% local authority and 25% for us to use for our own people that need to move. We've negotiated at 20% and 80% with yourselves. That doesn't mean we will definitely use it, but it gives us the opportunity sometimes to move people that absolutely have circumstances and they need to move within flagship group. So they can sometimes be used for that purpose, but they tend not to be under occupancy. They tend to be where people are maybe experiencing a very unpleasant antisocial behaviour and need a very rapid move or more urgent circumstances. So we don't have that power to move people.
So that's a Breckland issue?
It is a Breckland issue.
Just for your benefit, David, we have the allocations policy review coming before scrutiny in November. So that might be a timely contribution to make then. Victoria, you wanted to add to that, I believe.
Yeah, so our nominations agreement is 80 and 20% as well, so we're the same as flagship. We're quite lucky that our managed move list in the east is relatively, not in the east, sorry. My section of the business is all over the country, so within Breckland, the managed move list is relatively small. Now, with a management move, we have to make sure that we are offering properties that are in the right location for the customer. Maybe they're not happy with said location. If it's downsizing, and we will always talk to the council about releasing a larger property if they're happy for us to do that internal move or that managed move. So yeah, we do what we can. We do have a list. A void property comes in, we will always check that list initially to see if anyone is eligible for the area. And that's our first point of call, is to look at our management move list and see if anyone can match a void property coming up. And that's across the country. We do it everywhere in that principle. Over 55s, sheltered, supported, everything works the same way. We talk about mutual exchanges just because sometimes it can be quicker because we've got that 42-day deadline in order to agree the move in the first place. So they have, and I know Orbit is processing them and completing them within, or agreeing them within 22 days, so we can get it done really, really quickly on a mutual exchange. Sometimes that property isn't always available for a managed move, so it's just constantly checking and looking, and we do our best.
Lovely, thank you very much. Anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, just so the new build at Kingsfleet, so the Tillier and the Hopkins site aren't with us. So our only involvement there is with the Taylor Wimpey site that's just starting. And we're not currently aware of any delays on that delivery. We tend to focus a year ahead. And we had our project meeting Wednesday, so I'll go away and look at it just to see if there's any potential delays on the phases. I know the first phase has achieved golden brick, so that means just above slab. But if there is something that is a problem, then I'll report back, if that's okay.
Thank you. And you've waited patiently, William? You're the last speaker that hasn't spoke.
Probably. Oh, there we go. As part of the initial presentation, you talked about, I think your statement was, do we invest in rural communities or leave them to be dormitories? I'm very keen that you do invest in rural communities, and I guess it's a very simple question. How are you as an entity going to decide that as a policy, and what can we do to influence you around encouraging you to actually do what social housing providers have done for decades, which is provide small-scale housing in rural communities? Because I think we'd all recognise there is a massive issue. House prices are getting higher and higher. Young people that live and work in rural communities are struggling more and more to actually get a house in their communities. And I'm sure I and all my colleagues would like to see more providers provide those houses, either by doing it in partnership with us or in partnership with the community, but to enable somehow to get that as a policy so that it does continue to happen. So how are you going to make that decision if you're not sure at the moment? How do we influence you to do that?
So we are building in rural communities across all of our area. We're a strategic partner with Homes England, so we have our grant allocation. And over 400 homes of the 1,300 that we'll build in that programme are in rural areas. What we need to build in those areas is good levels of grant, because they're very expensive. It's the cost per home, as the site gets smaller, it escalates. So if you're using value for money, the larger the site, the cheaper per home we can build it, so the more people we can house. So there's a balance between the volume of people you can house against where they are. We do our best to make sure we provide a covering in all areas. I know our land and planning teams are working with Breckland, looking at areas of land that we can work with you on. Some of the land is quite challenging in areas where it's difficult. But that's something that the team are actively working with. Also, North Norfolk District Council as well. We're trying to find in some of the rural areas where Adrian's tenants and customers wish to live that we can service it. It's something that we do. Obviously, planning is always a challenge. The further you get into the rural areas, the more other people don't want you there. So it's tricky. And obviously our programme is quite big, but we'll do 710 homes this year, and our areas across all of East Anglia. So it's not just within Breckland. I know Breckland is the bit that you're most concerned about, but I hope my presentation at the beginning shows actually the way in which we've grown in what we're delivering in Breckland. So.
Lovely. Thank you. Happy, William? Yep. Okay, I'm conscious I've got possibly a couple of other questions from Terry and Roger, but I've got a couple from myself, so I'm just going to jump in there. Adrian, you mentioned about voids, and I can't remember who asked, but if I understand this right, the target is for a turnaround of 32 days, but you're achieving 57, is that right?
Sorry, we are achieving just short of 30 days as an average.
So that's the average.
Slightly higher for the sheltered and supported stock.
Yeah.
Our ambition is to achieve low 20s. What I would say is we did increase our void standard about 18 months, 2 years ago, because we felt we needed to do more to let homes rather than the basics.
Yeah.
It does take us longer, but our satisfaction levels have increased substantially. So they're in the high 80s. This month, actually, I can't say it's representative, it's 100%. People satisfied with the quality of the home they're moving into. So that's important to us, that it isn't just a quick turnaround, it is quality of turnaround as well.
Okay, but there is an aspiration to get that lower than 32?
Absolutely.
Okay. The other question is around disposals. So in Thetford at the moment, there's a number of auction signs popping up for flagship properties. And if you can appreciate as councillors, on the one hand, we've got a huge demand for housing and neighbours are seeing houses being sold and don't quite understand why that's happening. In the old days, Breckland and individual councillors were consulted on disposals before you as RSLs were allowed to dispose of them, and that doesn't happen anymore for whatever reason. How do you communicate to Breckland, to councillors, to the wider community, the rationale behind the disposals? Because it's building a lot of ill feeling in communities that there is a rationale, I'm sure, but we don't know why.
For me? You were pushing the button and I was thinking you were going to answer.
So I'm not aware that we don't consult with Breckland on disposals. We do with other local authorities. So
We do.
So it may be just at a different level within there. So we may not be letting you know.
Yeah.
But we'll take that away. There's a gentleman, James Payne, who runs our disposals framework or programme within our assets team. And we can get that answer from him. Collectively, across all of our 32,000 homes, we dispose of 150 homes a year. So we're not selling lots and lots. And we sell the homes where they are probably in the lowest performing area or the poorest condition, where to increase them to the standards that our regulator are putting on us is very expensive to achieve.
Yeah.
And those homes also aren't then lost to the population. They're just lived in by different people.
Okay.
But certainly the consultation bit does concern me that it's not reached your table, and that's something we need to do.
Members were definitely consulted on disposals in individual wards, because I remember being asked my opinion on several disposals, and we're not anymore. Whether that's a change within Breckland or a change with the housing associations, it'd be useful if we got to the bottom of that.
We will look into that, and apologies, we'll come back to you.
Yeah, no, that'd be really useful. Thank you. Spent a lot of time about housing. The other big flagship issue for many is garages. Where are we at in terms of addressing some of the challenges of poor garage stock that you guys own?
I must be honest, I don't have too much detail on that, but yeah, we do have a very large number of garages in the Breckland area. We do have we have surveyed all of our garages. We have a programme which is quite a lengthy programme over many years of gradually disposing of those where they simply are no longer economically viable. We are a bit caught in that trap of these are old buildings. They were built for cars that were much smaller, so they don't fit a modern car, so people don't use them as garages anymore, and they do tend to have asbestos and other challenges with them, so they're very expensive to repair but very low rent, so economically it's not good use of our money. So we have a programme where we can turn those sites into development sites. We've done that over the years. We have a few more. We have a couple of sites still in Breckland that we're exploring with you, possibly for modern methods of construction, temporary accommodation type scenarios. We try and look at those. They tend to be quite hard to develop as sites. They're not the easiest sites to do. But we will gradually, those that aren't being used, we will eventually sell them.
Okay, good. glad to hear they're not being forgotten, because it's certainly a big issue in the community, and people keep raising them. And the last point I'd like to make is around shared ownership. So I was quite saddened to hear the point about shared ownership. I'm a big supporter. I think it's a good way to get many people onto the property ladder and a sort of stake in their community. Are there ways that we can try? I appreciate there's some challenges, sort of legal-wise. How can we get more shared ownership?
So we are doing, across the flagship patch, we are doing more shared ownership year on year. Out of our 710 homes that we'll hand over, we will sell over 208 shared ownership homes.
Okay.
It's a product that we think is a really good low cost ownership entry level. I think we're at 200-ish. We're at our capacity until our programme increases. But we think it's a great product as well.
Lovely, that's good to hear. Thank you. Terry, did you have a second point you wanted to make?
Thank you. I have two, if that's okay. The first one relates to Terry's recent question just now about garages. I'm councillor for Boudica Ward in Thetford, which includes the ladies' estate, which is blighted by garages, frankly. Many of them are boarded up. Many of them are in poor repair. The surrounds are poor, the brickwork's crumbling. They're covered in various plants, moss, etc. And I'm constantly getting complaints from residents about the state of them. I was a little bit disappointed to hear that your answer to the problem is redevelopment, because that's the last thing people want on the ladies' estate, which is already quite dense in terms of housing. They would prefer either that the garages are knocked down and just used for parking spaces, or the floor is removed as well and they're returned to green space. When I go back to my residents and say that I've spoken to you, what can I tell them?
A good question, not one that I feel I can answer now to give you a sensible answer. I would very happily take that away, look at what our plans are for those garages, and then we can speak with you about what is our position, so that we're honest with you and can give you the honest answer rather than a platitude.
Excellent. And the second question is, what support do you have for people moving into homes? There aren't any social fund grants anymore, so do you offer support for decorating carpets, etc.? And is that standard, or do they have to apply for it? Thank you.
So, from a new build perspective, the flagship standard is carpets and blinds through all 10 years of homes that we hand over and put into our housing stock. So that's the start point from new build. And Adrian mentioned about the void standard increasing.
Yeah, the void standard doesn't currently include carpets and blinds as a standard issue. We are actually looking at, I'm leading a piece of work to look at whether that is something we could do. I must be honest, I've worked in housing for too many years, and carpets has always been a real challenge, because there are good carpets and we try and leave them, but if we leave them, there's often little things living in them that react as soon as somebody new moves in, no matter how clean the house was, and then we find we have difficulty because the tenants that have moved in have fleas and things that we then have to try and deal with. So it's a real challenge. Do we leave carpet? Don't we leave it? If we were to put carpet in every one of our voids, it would be an extra £3 million a year, which is a significant sum for us at the moment, but we are looking at whether we can do that. What we do have is that you may have heard of Hopestead. It's our homelessness charity. So those people that are moving into homes that are coming from somewhere that they have nothing, they might be coming from temporary accommodation, we offer furniture packs, whole packs, carpeting, cupboards, beds, everything to set them up in a home. So we are also, I mentioned Lofty Heights earlier, we're looking to work with you where they can recover goods that could be reused, We're looking to do that so that people can purchase them at a very low level. So we're trying to offer better opportunities for people.
Okay, that's reassuring to hear. Recently, I was in communication with a woman who very sadly had to leave a house because of a fire and move into another house. She had no support at all. So I don't know if that is usual or standard or what happened there, frankly. I know you don't deal with individual cases, but that's just my experience.
It certainly isn't standard. We call it decanting, and we're having to decant more people this year. Actually, Breckland has had a really tough year. We've had significant number of fires, floods. We've had repeat floods, repeat fires. So that has impacted. Some of the void issue is that, where we've had to try and move people elsewhere. We've had to find accommodation for them for quite lengthy periods of time. That shouldn't be the case. They should be supported through that. They should, where they move to, should be somewhere suitable for them to. If it's short term, it'll be probably temporary holiday accommodation, something like that. If it's long term, we need to move their goods and make sure they can live in it as they would in a normal home.
Okay. Are there any members of the Commission that haven't spoken that want to add anything? Paul, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was pleased to hear that your refurbishment is becoming airtight. Are any of your housing associations looking at passive housing, both built and refurbished? Because the biggest cost for most people who really can't afford it is heating. I just wondered if that's somewhere on your radar or you don't really, not interested.
So passive house is something that we are aware of. Currently, we think the costs versus the benefit of building to passive house standard, the costs outweigh the benefit. We try to look at all of our new homes holistically. So last year, out of the 700 odd homes we built, 96% were to an EPC-B. So that was a standard one level up from building regulations. And currently this year, over 30% of our handovers are achieving an EPC-A. What we think is that that's where you get better value in terms of the efficiency of your home for your money than going into more difficult to achieve and obviously a higher standard things like passive house. So we're aware of it. We think we can concentrate on getting better for everyone rather than excellent for a few.
Could I? Yeah, just to add, we do have a company we own, Gasway. They are looking into, they're looking forward as to what does the future hold. I think I mentioned it earlier around what does new heating look like, what is emerging. We've heard of hydrogen boilers and so on. So they are looking at all the new technologies to see what is the future going to be, where's the direction, because gas is gradually going to be removing, and a company called Gasway needs to look at its future.
Okay. Roger, did you have anything on your list that is outstanding, or has everybody else sort of picked off the points you wanted to raise there?
I'd like, if possible, Chairman, just to go back to the garage blocks. Yep. Because what you're actually doing is you're giving those tenants that use the garages, you're giving them notice to vacate the garage block. Okay, so if they're storing garden items, furniture, etc. in there, they're emptying those garages. But then what you're doing is you're putting the entire garage block up for auction, and you're specifying that the buyer has to buy the entire block. So if I give you an example of Primrose Square again, concrete sectional garages, you've given the tenants notice to vacate, which they've done. The residents in that square want the garages taken down so they can provide increased parking spaces, because parking is really limited on an estate which was built in the 1960s. But we now face the spectre on there that the entire garage block is going to be auctioned off to a third party who may then just let them out to people that aren't residents, will have no control over them, and they'll be using them basically as lockups. and I don't think account has been taken of the residents' wishes on how to improve the residents' lives around there. I think you're trying to offload those without the hassle of the demolition, and I get that some of them have got asbestos and there's cost associated with that. I just think the way that you're doing it, we're all going to lose control over it, because we're going to end up with a third party that's going to own these still dilapidated garages that are in poor use. They're not big enough to put modern cars in, you quite rightly say, and I think you're offloading the problem to somebody else, and then the residents will have no comeback because they'll have no control over the third party. And I visited some of the auction sites where you're selling these garage blocks, and I question the validity of what you're doing with that. I don't think that's to the benefit of residents. If you were selling off individual garages, so the residents in those areas, if they wanted to buy an individual garage as a lock-up, might be a different thing, but that's not what you're offering the residents. The other thing I just wanted to touch on, if I can, Terry, was around sensitive lets and letting. So I'm aware that you could get a housing authority somewhere else in the country that want to house a family in Breckland. You take those tenants on. I'm just wondering what checks are done between the housing team and yourselves on the background, probably, to those families. I mean, we've got I'm not going to name any names, but we've had instances where you've moved people in, you or Breckland have moved people in out of area, and then we have constant police presence. We've had a stabbing, we've had GBH, we've had domestic violence, drugs and all sorts, that's basically descended onto what can be quite a quiet housing estate where most people just want to get on generally, mind their own business and get on with their lives. And I'm just wondering what checks are actually done at the front end before a problem has moved from one part of the country to your part of the country. Could you just expand on what you do with that, please?
Yeah, in terms of garages, it's quite difficult to answer. The demand isn't very high because of the quality of the garages. So we tend, if the garages are being used and are very well let, we're leaving them alone because they're being used and they're tending to stay in a reasonable condition. It's where they've fallen out of condition or they're just not simply being used. We do let a lot to non-tenants as well. And we are obliged when we sell anything to try and achieve the best market value for it, which links into disposals as well. So it is more cost effective for us to sell the whole than to sell the singles. But it's important to say we do reinvest that money. So we don't make a profit as an organisation. All of the money we get from that will go back into developing new homes or delivering services. So I don't know there's much I can say specifically about that one. In terms of sensitive lets, most of the time that is for the local authority to do the assessment of need. So if it doesn't happen very often nowadays, but if another local authority needs to move somebody for witness protection, let's say, there will be a confidential meeting about that and the police will be involved and so on, and they will assess that need. We work very closely, and I know Orbit will do the same, on a confidential basis for some very sensitive ones. And between us, we'll try and assure that we can do it as a sensitive let to the needs. But sometimes we aren't aware that it is that sensitive. We are not made aware as a landlord of those circumstances. But there are checks. It's local authority to local authority. It's never from any other third parties.
Just very briefly, Roger.
Just want to come back on the garage blocks, because I don't think you answered my point about the effect that this is going to have on the existing tenants and the community where these garage blocks are based. What you're doing is you're selling an entire block, and Terry eloquently said that there's a problem with garages. We all know the problem with the garages. You're selling the block, but basically you're just passing on the problem. You're getting rid of your responsibility for the state of the garage blocks. You sell it, we are still going to have garage blocks, which are going to be a problem in those communities. And in terms of enforcement, I mean, dilapidations on those garages is quite a high bar to get any enforcement action. So when asbestos roofs start to get break and smashed in and garage doors are missing and that sort of thing, it's very high bar to get enforcement action taken to get those repairs carried out. What I'm really concerned about is we're just going to end up with various third parties who are going to own these blocks. The community is going to have no control. You're not going to have any control, and neither are Breckland. And I think we could end up in a situation where we've got dilapidated garages which are used by lockups from third parties, and I can see that a bit further down the road the problem is just going to get worse and worse. And I would ask you just to pause this, please, and just take account of the future. I hear what you're saying. You're not making loads of money on these garages, but I've seen what your asking prices on the auction sites. But you're still getting money for those, and then getting rid of the responsibility. I think you've got the situation where these garage blocks have been there for so many years, and a number of them have got into such a state that I do think that you've got a responsibility to do what's right and take those down and demolish them, create parking spaces. Yes, some of them could be sold for development, for a new house or something to be built on that estate, and that's a planning issue, and I'm sure that would work. But many of them aren't, and I really worry about what you're leaving the community by basically absolving yourself of responsibility.
Can I suggest, Adrian, you mentioned fairly early that garages your thing, and I've heard from a couple of members now that garages in particular are a particular challenge in our communities. Can we park garages and maybe revisit it at a future meeting with somebody more relevant from Flagship, that's their area specifically? And I think, I'm hearing a number of members of the Commission might want to probe that a bit more separately to the housing discussion. I think that'd be really useful. I've got one more speaker who hasn't spoken, so I do want to give her the opportunity before I wrap this one up. So, Samantha, please.
Hi, yeah, Orbit did touch on mould and damp, and although I've not had any official complaints, I know of residents via social media and my workplace that have problems with mould and damp and have suffered for some considerable time. Can I ask how you deal with the issue and what your turnaround time is for resolving the problem for the occupants of your properties, bearing in mind the health implications?
Okay, so with regards to Orbit, as soon as we get notification of mould and damp, we aim to make an appointment with the customer. Well, they've got to make contact with the customer within, I think it's 72 working hours. After that, then, I'm not a part of the DMC team, so I can't give full accurate timescales. I can certainly find that out for you. So they go out and do an investigation to see the level of work that needs to be done. If it's severe, then we will decamp people out. We have done that in other areas of the country that I've been involved in. So we have decanted customers out to a better location, and we will certainly help them when it comes to the affordability of moving. We will cover that move, and we'll even help with things like carpeting in order so they don't financially lose out because of that. With regards to the timescales of getting the works completed, I haven't got that information for you, but I can certainly get it. That's not a problem. And I do know that we do have a list of customers in the Breckland area that have raised damp in the with their contact with us, and I know they are investigating each case. So maybe the addresses you've got, the addresses that I've got, because I have got a list with me just in case. But yeah, I can certainly find the timescales out for you. That's not an issue.
Damp and mould has been a huge focus for us over the last 18 months. I think, like other housing providers, I'm very pleased that we took it seriously a little bit sooner than others, and I think Orbit's the same. We have a very proactive attitude. We encourage it. It's an IVR on our, if you phone us, it is one of the options dedicated to tell us if you have damp and mould in your property. It was a task force led by our Chief Operating Officer, so it was at the senior level. It's regularly reported to board about progress. We've seen a significant increase in people reporting damp and mould, but we're pleased that a very small number of those actually require significant work. There are some, and as mentioned there, where that is the case, we move people out. We don't allow them to stay if it is a risk to their health. Part of that reason for us wanting to visit people is exactly that. We're finding people that haven't been in contact with us are at much higher risk. Because we go into a lot of properties to fix, to do annual services for gas and so on, and we tend to spot it. what we're finding is it's people that haven't been talking to us where the situation is worse. We will go in and we will clean down mould. We are trying to advise where sometimes it can be needing to move furniture away from walls or better circulation or not vent your tumble dryer. But we're taking it very seriously. We continue to take it seriously. We're gearing up to what the next year has. I've got in front of me, funnily enough, some analysis we're doing about what's the most likely homes. So we know that. We know the most likely people. It's larger families that are experiencing more often. But interestingly, it's people living in, older people living in homes that can't afford to heat them. So we're trying this year to proactively target those homes so that we go before the winter comes to say, right, we think you're at risk of damp and mould, what can we do to support you?
Okay, thank you. I know there's a number of members with mould-related cases in their ward, so I'm grateful for that question. I think that teased it out quite well. I'm not going to take any further speakers because I am conscious of time and I do want to move on. I did want to give you the opportunity, Claire, as the Cabinet member, just to any final sort of comments on this. There we go.
Thank you. Yes, really, just to thank our housing provider guests for coming along today, and I welcome further working with them and look forward to new properties coming forward. So thank you very much. It's been very, very informative, I think. And I did just want to add for information for the Commission that we senior officers have had conversations recently with Flagship around disposal. So thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. From my point of view, I've been making a couple of notes here because I think it's important that we pick up the actions that we've discussed. So we spoke about sharing some more information about help that's available through housing associations to your tenants and sharing that with councillors. I think that'd be particularly useful. And you mentioned the dedicated contact details for councillors. I think that was Flagship specific. Orbit, I assume, have something similar. If we could share for all members a bit of a sort of how-to guide, or you must have a document about contact details and key points of contact. I'm conscious we've just had an election. There's lots of new members. Want to make sure everybody knows who's best to contact. I think that'd be really useful. You mentioned, Adrian, I think it was, there's an aspiration to get to 100% of the visits. We're at 75% at the moment, and there's an aspiration to bring the void rate down. I've made a note here to invite you guys back in a year's time and to see how you're getting on with that, if members of the Commission are happy with that. We're sort of in a state of flux, and there's a slide about a pipeline. I'd like to know how we're getting on with that in a year's time. So if you're up for that and we haven't scared you off, then it'd be lovely to welcome you back next year. But very grateful for your time. Did you want to add anything, Adrian, there?
Thank you very much. What I would say, if there are new members, we would always welcome, if there are a number of members that would like to come and speak to us in more detail about some of the work we do, we'd be happy to arrange that, because it is quite a difficult area to get to grips with. There is an awful lot that we do in our services and the teams, and we'd be happy to share that with you. But thank you for inviting us today. And there is a dedicated line. I'll provide it. There's a dedicated email address.
Brilliant.
And that goes to my PA, who sees everything, to make sure that, so she will escalate things to me if she thinks I need to see them. Otherwise, they are tended to deal with the head of service or the team.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. I'm going to pause there, folks, for a 5-minute comfort break. I don't know about you, but I want another coffee.
Chairman, could I just add something to the things that I think we need to look at? Because we touched on shared ownership, and I was really interested to hear what the gentleman said about that. I'm aware through tenants there are specific issues and owners of these houses. There's specific issues around shared ownership where the housing association owns a percentage share. It's all right for the first tenant. It's the same problem with the Breckland Bridge model. We've got problems with that as well, with existing tenants then want to move on, and that's really difficult. And I'm just wondering whether we need to feed this into the planning system as well, because when we're looking at planning applications, we're generally, and Claire will know this, we're generally looking at a percentage of affordable homes as rented and a percentage of shared ownership. I don't know whether we've got any flexibility on that, but it is that in principle, it's a really good idea for first-time buyers. It's when they go to move on, and can we have a bit more of a conversation and understanding of the problems around that, and is there anything we and the housing associations can do to try and improve that?
Yep. I think that's possibly more around the sort of strategic and operational planning side of it rather than housing. But I'll come on to the work programme later, but I want to sort of theme our meetings around different portfolios. So that would be a good one to bring up when we invite Sarah Suggett along at a future meeting. But we've heard the point. So I'm going to pause there, folks. If we could be back in 5 minutes at 22, and that'll give time for our guests to depart. Thank you. Can I get you to take your seats, folks? Are we ready? Okay, we're going to move on to item 8, please. So item 8 is the Finance, Performance and Projects Report. That was circulated in the pack. Very grateful to Cabinet Member Paul Hewitt for joining us. Would you like to introduce the report, Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Commission members, in the absence of Councillor Cowan and Councillor Webb, I'm not necessarily delighted, but I'm reasonably pleased to present the report in front of you now, which is agenda item number 8. This report has previously gone to Cabinet a couple of days ago, and as such there may be some references, because the identical report to Cabinet, whereby the recommendations should relate also to members of the Commission and not just to Cabinet. I will endeavour to answer any questions that you may have, although I have got a great team of officers right behind me, and anything that we cannot answer, we will endeavour to get back to you as soon as we can. In May 2023, Cabinet saw the first combined finance and performance quarterly report for the Q4 period, and now corporate projects has been added for this, the Q1 report for the year 2023 to 24. This report, as outlined in the summary, will provide information on the forecast full-year financial position of the Council as at 30th of June, with an overview of the performance moving forward for the year to the following year. An overview of each of the areas I will just give briefly below. On the area of finance, Appendix A, or 1, from page 24 onwards, gives information relating to the forecast full-year financial position as at 30th of June 2023. As is expected for a Q1 report, there will be a number of estimates and assumptions which will, over the course of the year, revert back to actuals, invariably closing any budget gaps over the year. That said, as at 30th of June, we see the continued impact of high inflation, high utilities costs and high fuel prices, along with the continued high cost of living, which have challenged more than our planned numbers in the budget setting process last year. And even though best estimates of the cost increases were taken into account when we set the budget, some of these costs and increased costs are expected to remain in the short term. That said, as mentioned earlier, members will recall a broadly similar financial position in Q1 from last year, and whilst these variances currently are not welcomed, nonetheless, they're probably anticipated. Looking at 3 areas of the financial report, the revenue forecast outturn is currently estimating an overspend of £671,000, and those major variances have been highlighted in Appendix A, together with the remediation steps planned to reduce these down where appropriate. That said, and I know members will be aware of this, some of these variants actually make good news. For instance, the loss of revenue from one of our business centres actually involved a client for the business centre moving from one centre to another part of the Breckland estate. And at the same time, the loss of interest from Breckland Bridge has itself resulted in the fact that the loans required were lower than expected because improvements in build rate and quantity have been higher than expected. That said, one of the variances identified, which is the progress towards our efficiency programme, is not where we would like to be, and we have tasked officers across the Council to make sure that this reduces as the year progresses. And the establishment of a new projects function is itself starting to play its role, where we're looking to see numbers improving over the next 18 to 24 months. The forecast capital outturn is currently a below spend of £1.146 million. This will also change as projects are monitored as the year progresses. Variances for capital spend are also detailed in the appendices. The investment budget from a Treasury perspective shows an above budget income of £151,000 as a result of higher interest rates and maintained higher interest rates, higher than anticipated when the budget is set. And this additional income will help mitigate higher revenue costs throughout the year as long as interest rates remain at their current levels. The performance part of the report is in Appendix B or 2 from page 32 onwards within the report. And I'm delighted to bring the new look performance data to this commission, highlighting some of the work that the Council is doing well in Q1, but also identifying those areas where we want to improve over the next few months and quarters. Commission members will note that this is the first report to display a revised set of key performance indicators, which we're also seeking formal approval to report on going forwards. And the full list of these is identified, as mentioned, in Appendix B of the report, along with any data, supporting commentary and indicators in terms of where those key performance indicators need to be heading. We've seen some pleasing results from these areas: improvements to complaint response times following intervention of the organisation development and performance teams and the Performance Board. We also want to see increasing improvements in our freedom of information response times, which are lower than at this time last year, and has seen 9 out of 93 requests receiving a late response. To my mind, that is not acceptable, and work is underway to understand and resolve the root cause of these delays. My understanding is that the majority of these FOI overruns related to a cluster for a very specific housing need, which is currently being investigated. We're also reporting for the first time percentage of food safety intervention actions taken within 2 months against businesses with a food hygiene rating of 0 to 2. Again, this has fallen below our Q1 target, so it's being closely monitored to establish if there is a trend related to our ability to meet the indicator target. And finally, members will have noted we've seen a rise in the number of missed bins connections in our key performance indicator, most significantly in June, 21 bins, compared to April, 3 bins, and May, 10 bins. These figures do need to be placed in the context of 300,000 bins being successfully collected in June, but we are still keen to understand exactly how and why missed bins continue to be part in an attempt to try and drive that down to the absolute lowest number acceptable. And finally, Chair, from the corporate projects part of the report, this is on page 37 of Appendix C, we've currently got 6 projects that are currently classified as corporately critical, all of which are moving in a positive direction. And I should point out that the August corporate projects report that was only released a couple of days ago has identified the one project currently identified as amber is now green in terms of the IDOCs moving forwards. There has been, invariably in relation to projects, some slippage against some initial completion dates, but as a rule, this has been anticipated because it relates to areas, for instance, accessing markets over which we have no control. 3 projects in particular that are worth highlighting that have moved through major milestones this quarter. The IDOC software implementation project, critical to our planning service moving forwards. Following a specification review and some gaps in the functionality, things are moving positively and forwards again, following some intervention at the highest level from both this council and also from IDOCs. On the solar projects area, critical to our 2035 aspirations, a number of feasibility studies are being completed, and a report currently is outlining the options in relation to installation of solar panels at key strategic council-owned properties. Design work is ongoing, and members will be presented with some concrete options over the next couple of months. And finally, I'm delighted to report the planning permission for the Attleborough Leisure project has been granted. A lot of detailed work and liaison with the Attleborough Academy and Attleborough Town Councils has been undertaken in order for preparation for the procurement and funding application for a new 3G football pitch. As I mentioned, I'd be delighted to take any specific questions along with my fantastic team of officers behind, but the report is in front of you now, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that, Paul, and I appreciate there's been a lot of work put into this. I read the report in its new look, and I found it quite useful, actually, so sort of bringing all the different aspects together in one report rather than lots of different reports. Very useful. I've got Linda first. Anybody else? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm on page 32, performance, quarter one. Most of you know I don't really understand maths or finance. I could write an essay but not do maths. But I have a question on the customer service satisfaction. Why is the target only 80%? All the jobs I've done in my career, you should always strive for 100%. You might not achieve it, but it gives you something to work towards. We've got 80% there, and we've achieved 93.8, which is brilliant. But unless you're striving for the top, it doesn't give you the motivation to do better.
Yep, thank you. Do you want to take that one, Paul?
I'm happy to take, but I can also pass on to others to do. For me, 80% is not satisfactory, but that is the nature of any organisation that strives to do better. I think that 80% target, more than anything, reflects a pragmatic view that no matter what we will do, we will never manage to satisfy everyone all of the time. I'm more interested in the negative of that. To what extent actually are we not meeting current satisfaction targets? And that's a real focus for us moving forwards. But I think the 80% more than anything else is just a pragmatic reflection that whilst we endeavour to ensure all of our residents and businesses thrive, invariably some will feel slightly missed out.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
Yeah, Councillor Turner asked my question, but I will pick up on another one. The food safety satisfaction, I think, is 88%. Or is that the target? There we go. Yeah, so they did set a target of 95 and we picked up 98. So that seems to work a little bit, doesn't it? I don't know why the targets are set like that, but it looks good once we have achieved more than the target set. Whether that's not a mind-playing game, I don't know. But the figures mount up, and the report for performance quarter one is excellent. So obviously we can improve as we go forward. Thank you.
If I can just pick up on that, as members know, a key performance indicator should always trigger an action, whether that action is positive to celebrate things that are going well, or negative where actually we are underperforming in certain areas. And my take is that we need to challenge success as well as failure, because we can always do better.
Thank you. Gordon, please.
Yes, thank you. I just thought I'd make a comment, really. Page 32, number of missed bins. You may or may not be aware that there is work going on the A47 at the moment, and that means a number of roads have been blocked, and a number of roads within my ward and within Councillor Plummer's ward as well have had missed bins. I have, in fact, this morning written to some residents, to Breckland and to Circle about this, because I think they're doing quite well at getting them picked up again. And I'm surprised it's as low as 30, considering the number of houses down roads that have been blocked off in our area, where they are just occasionally missed. So I think well done for getting them down that low, but that is a reason you can look for. And National Highways told me on Tuesday night that it's going to be another 2 years.
And thank you for that. We are aware, particularly in terms of challenges around the A47 and bins being missed outside of their usual collection period. I suspect, and members of this commission might not necessarily expect otherwise, that bin number will probably hold for the next quarter or two until revised routing and revised collection approaches can be used for those areas that are currently being impacted by diversions.
If I can just come back, I mean, the problem with these closures is the bin lorries can access down them, but every now and again they are closed off for 10 minutes or a quarter of an hour, and of course the bin lorry can't stand at the end of the road for a quarter of an hour waiting to get down, and normally they go back and do it. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Roger?
Yeah, it was just a comment really, Chairman, just to say well done to the team for these new performance indicator layout. I think that was much more user-friendly, as you alluded to. I found it really useful, and I just want to say thank you for that. Great job. Well done.
Thank you. That's the acknowledging success theme we're continuing with there. So you're on message, Roger, so that's good. The point I was going to make, Paul, is I'm conscious of our meetings calendar doesn't necessarily flow with the reporting timetable, and I think we might need to give that some thought in the future. We're fortunate this week that Cabinet was on Monday, Scrutiny's today. Normally I would have been able to attend, but I couldn't go on Monday. Here we are in September looking at the first quarter, but then we're meeting again in November. So I just think there might need to be a bit of communication from a performance point of view, but also DEM services around scheduling of meetings. I think that would help streamline things. Did you want to comment on that, Ryan? I've noticed the machines work better if you tap them a few times and warm them up.
There we go. Yeah, so I think for the Q2 report, we're going to Cabinet at the end of November, and then we're coming here on the 21st of December. So that'll be it for Q2, but for sort of Q3 onwards, I'm happy to have a discussion with DEMS around the scheduling of those. Okay, yeah, I think that'd be really useful, just so that we can make it all flow a bit better. Anybody else want to comment on this particular item, please? No? So I think broadly people are quite happy. In terms of setting KPIs, Paul, I appreciate it's for Cabinet to adopt the revised KPIs. What role do you think Scrutiny has in identifying possible KPIs in the future? Tease them out with you and add them in, or how do you want us to deal with that?
I mean, for me, we should always have a dialogue with overridden scrutiny, with Cabinet and with wider members. I'm going to say something that I know I'm going to get told of. For me, I still think we've got too many key performance indicators because not all of them are key performance indicators. But they are critical, I think, for our officer colleagues to make sure that every separate part of our organisation is delivering to the highest ability that we can. I think invariably any key performance indicator is going to change over time as to whether it's still relevant, whether it's focused, and whether it is still action orientated that just says as a result of a key performance indicator not being met, we can do something about it to close it. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm very conscious we want to make sure we're measuring the right things and not just things for the sake of it, so I'm pleased about that. Okay, don't see anybody else indicating, so we'll note that report. Thank you very much. Move on to 9, which is performance framework review. Anything to add specific to that one? No? Happy? Take them all together? Yeah. Don't see anybody else indicating. Even better. Move on to, have I missed anything out? No. 10, outside body feedback. Does anybody have any outside body feedback? Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For residents who use the QEH, especially northwest of the district, I had the privilege to be invited to a new build hospital programme discussions with Lord Nick Markham, Minister of the Lords and Parliamentary and the Secretary of State for the Department of Health and Social Care, and we was joined by NHS England Chair Richard Medlins, along with the QEH Board Chairman and local MPs. That's discussed, the programme, how it's going to go forward. They're having consultations locally with staff, patients, to see what sort of hospital requirements is needed from their point of view. And he also mentioned as well, I asked the question, and he did say, if the worst scenario happened, this is a cross-party programme. So it will not be put on the bonfire like some projects in the past have done when opposition has taken over. The YAB, we're continuing with the YAB. They held a YAB Awards night a few weeks ago so we could recognise the achievements of young commissioners and presented awards, and I sat there and I ended up being presented with an outstanding advocate award for young people, which was a real big shock. The YAB has also been they're on the shortlist now for the Flourish Awards in Norwich next week, and also is the Cup of Tea Mental Health and Wellbeing Programme, which the YAB have funded again this year along with Breckland Council. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Peter. I did see your award, and congratulations. I know you've been a big supporter of the YAB over the years, so well deserved. Any other outside body feedback items? No, I know Robert's not here today. Normally we get the health overview and scrutiny, but he can't be with us today. Okay, move on to 11, scrutiny call-ins. I don't believe we've had any, and I don't believe on item 12 with any councillor call for actions either. As ever, I would encourage people to take advantage of those opportunities for raising issues if anything pops up. And then moving on to the work programme, we've got a couple of items booked in for November. You'll see that we've got the HMO charging policy, also the housing allocations policy and the housing bereavement services policy all at November, which would be useful to take them all together. We also extended an invite to Breckland Housing to attend today, but they couldn't attend. And they are quite a big provider in Breckland, so if members are happy, I would like to give them the opportunity to come in November. And Claire, I believe you're available in November as well, so we'll have a few housing-related bits together. Linda.
Can we include the other housing providers? So we've got Saffron in Shipton, and there are other housing providers, and unless we involve them all, you know, we're not hearing from them.
I think I'll liaise with Ruth, but we spoke to the housing team about who to invite. There's no one specific we're not inviting. We are trying to invite everybody, so we'll have a think about who we've missed off and make sure we extend an invitation.
Yeah, if I could just mention, Mr. Chairman, Cotman as well in my patch.
Yeah.
And I do have more issues with those than flagship.
Okay. If members have specific housing association or specific named people, feed it into myself and Ruth, and we can pick that up. I mean, we got flagship because I went and spoke to them, and so sometimes best to have a direct contact. Harry.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. And picking up on Councillor Sir Linda's query, because I'm also happens to be in my ward. I've also got Broadland as another significant provider. What I would suggest, and this builds on having our recent discussion about KPIs for Breckland itself, in terms of the housing providers today, leaving aside the question of shared ownership and garages, which in ways are distinct, separate things. I might suggest, I know that for yourself, you suggested people coming back in a year's time. I think given some of the issues that have been mentioned, though Councillor Taylor's mentioned mould, etc., I think what would be helpful would be a shorter period for them all to come back and have either some areas that we want them to focus or address on, so when they come here, we're not asking them questions about, like, well, what are your timescales and so on and so forth. So if you like, their own KPIs and their own boards that they address, so we can then use that time to drill down a little bit more into some areas. Some things will have moved on in terms of relationship and so forth. I'm also conscious, obviously, that members will have had, I think new members are refreshed with all the providers all their whole stock. So we've got a huge, great database. But I think in terms of drilling down some of the things that have come up today, we're probably only scratching the surface. I'm conscious of some people that aren't commission members here who would have other questions around around providers. But so it's partly, in a way, we might also possibly suggest to providers, as we're saying to Breckland, have you considered A, B and C as a KPI, but how do you judge yourself there? But also my question would be at the top level, how does the actual boards of Breckland, just like we're the board, if you like, at Cabinet and Breckland, how do they assure themselves that everything is fine and they don't find out as an afterthought through the media? So not getting up individual cases, I think that might be helpful. Not suggesting this comes back automatically 6 months, but it might be a sort of May period. I just think that if we give people indication of, can you comment on the following using these particular areas, etc., and your own KPIs, and it might be when we look at their KPIs, we say, well, does that fully reflect, the lived experience of our tenants? So that's my long-winded suggestion, Chairman.
Lovely. I think I understood it. Thank you, Harry. Also in November, folks, we've got the AI update, so that's a fairly complete meeting for November. Does anybody have any suggestions at this point to add to the work programme? Linda.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just thinking back to when I was a portfolio holder, and Overview and Scrutiny used to call a different portfolio holder in to each meeting. And going back to your point at the beginning about a theme, so like we've got housing, which makes sense all in one go, and we'd have Claire there. Could we look at all the work programmes to be themed with that portfolio holder, because it is this Commission's duty to hold those portfolio holders to account.
Yep. You're referring back to the time when Liz Gould was Chair of Scrutiny, and I quite enjoyed the approach of a named portfolio holder. I think we scrutinised the leader at the time. That was quite fun. So yes, that's exactly the approach I want to take, and I think it's also fairer to the portfolio holders because they can plan in their diaries when they need to be available to attend. So I know you're available for November, Claire, so you're our first one, I'm afraid. But we also have budget coming up, prep, so there'll be a finance, that will tie in nicely with finance for Phil Cowan. So I'll map it out with Ruth, liaise with the Cabinet, and then we'll take it from there. But that's certainly the approach that I would like. Roger.
Just looking on page 52 here, there's a couple of items where I think I might have had a hand in these, and that presentations were going to be provided. I go to future possible items. There's one there for Steve James, Matt Barnard. Says depending on induction training. Just wondering when that's going to be fitted in. And also the ones down the bottom, I'd really like as soon as possible to get probably Tristan in to talk about the Inspiring Communities programme. And I'm really keen to get to the bottom of what's going on with these health and wellbeing partnerships, because all this thing has been formed. It hasn't really sort of been discussed in any detail at full council. I go upstairs and there are quite a lot of staff that are sitting there I know working as part of that team, but it's a bit of a mystery at the moment as to exactly what they're all doing and how we're monitoring the progress, and more importantly, what are the outcomes from the work that they're doing. And I would just query, and this is one for you, Terry, is this commission meeting often enough? Because I think there's a lot of work, and at the moment it just seems to me that we have a big summer recess and now we're not going to meet again until November. I'm just wondering whether we need to speed things up. We need to get these portfolio holders in a bit more regularly, so they're coming in once or twice a year. And just generally move it forward and do the the detailed scrutiny. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but to me, it just seems like we're not meeting often enough to do it.
In terms of the future possible items, some of these are a legacy from pre-election, and Ruth and I need to spend some time working out where we're at in terms of officers preparing the report, so and putting them into the timeline. So that still needs to happen. Inspiring communities, yes. I wanted to be fair to Tristan because he's a brand new cabinet member, and I wanted to not invite him in straight away, give him time to get to know his portfolio. But as one of the bigger portfolios and one that members are very much engaged with, he is on the list to come sooner rather than later. In terms of frequency of meetings, I'd be guided by commission members, to be honest with you. So if you want to liaise with me, please do. I have started to map the number of cabinet members and the number of meetings, and we wouldn't get to see everybody in a year because there's too few meetings compared to cabinet members. So we need, we would need to look at that if we wanted to see everybody in a decent amount of time. So I will give that some thought, and I'll liaise with Ruth as well. But I'm personally not adverse to additional meetings, but need to be aware of people's time commitments. Okay. Any other comments on work programme?
One other item, and this all forms part of the performance management, but I'm just wondering whether it would be interesting to get senior management to come in and talk to us about we obviously got this new ethos here of working from home or working remotely since COVID. It's very easy for members of the public to criticise, they can't get hold of people in the office, etc. I'm not adverse to people working remotely, but I just think it would be good to get some feedback. Now the system's bedded in and they've been doing it for quite some time, is that actually working for us as a council? Have the outcomes improved for the council? We obviously don't want to see that they've gone down and the performance indicators say otherwise. I'm just keen to test that and just find out what senior management sort of thoughts are. I mean, I'll give you a quick example. If you come into this building on a Friday morning and you walk around upstairs, it's like the Mary Celeste, quite honestly, a lot of the time compared to the rest of the week. That's probably a very good thing. We've got motivated staff. We've got some really talented staff at work for Breckland. I would just like to get that feedback now it's bedded in, and is that actually the best for us, or was it working better when people were more engaged in the office? I don't know. I think that's probably something we ought to explore.
Yeah, no, that's noted, and we have got the portfolio around customer and corporate services, so I think we can pick that up as part of that discussion as well. Thank you. I will make the point, it is your work programme as a commission, so please do come and talk to me if you've got specific suggestions for agenda items or how we want to structure things. I'm, open door policy. Last item then, just to note, next meeting will be the 9th of November. And then, as I say, Ruth and I will have a look at the timetable for the period after that. But thank you all for your contributions today. I thought the session with the housing associations particularly was really useful, and lots that we can build on from there. But meeting closed. Thank you.